Krishna Krishna ni
What of me, I asked? What of me? Bhishma replied, power is truth. Dharma, darkness. If we, the children of the meek, should inherit an earth whose rainforest lungs breathe a tale of waste, should we dance or break into gnashing of teeth at the news of our inheritance?
That was Mallika Sarabhai, Ahmedabad-based Bharatnatyam and Kuchipudi dancer. Mallika has traveled all over India and around the world, championing causes such as human rights, social justice, and emancipation of women. Today, she heads up Darpana Academy in Ahmedabad, founded by her mother, Mrinalini Sarabhai. Late Mrinalini Sarabhai took Indian classical dance to world stage and mentored thousands of students in India and abroad during her lifetime. Mallika's father, Vikram Sarabhai, is known as father of space and nuclear technology in India. Mallika will challenge your thinking. She will get you rethinking about depiction of women in Indian scriptures. And she will also get you to think about the current political establishment and to think beyond what you see today about a better future and what would it take for you to get to that future. So over to Mallika Sarabhai. So hi Mallika, it's nice to have you here for this dialogue. And I'm so excited after our conversations in San Francisco. Thank you to Yadavan also. I discovered a gem of a person, and I understand that your creativity is a partnership in imagination. And so thank him also on my behalf. So I would like to set a little framework for my curiosity in doing this project. I do consider you one person who has nurtured and preserved the conscience of India that I take pride in, that was set by the makers of India. So I do cherish the legacy of India that our forebearers have created. And more so because the atmosphere in which we grew up, there was so much dialogue, there was so much argumentation, there was dissent. And through that vibrancy emerged an imagination of the future. And it reflected in art, it reflected in literature, it reflected in every aspect of life. And it brought such deep satisfaction. And therefore, what I'm interested in is to create an archive for the next 100 years for our future generations when you and I won't be there. They need to understand that no matter how history books are written by the people who have an agenda, The history is not defined by the books, but history is defined by what we hold dear in our hearts, what gets reflected in authentic arts, not propaganda. And therefore, I'm reaching out to you because you are one of those, through your art, through your discourses, through your teaching, you have preserved that legacy that we all inherit. So that's my purpose in having this dialogue. And thank you for what you're doing. I'm inspired, and I'm sure many other people are inspired. So I will start with a quick exercise, a very interesting exercise. Like, as I told you when we met, my practice is ethnography of imagination. So I care less about what I see around me, but I care more about what people hold dear in their imagination, because that's what drives people to work towards that imagination. And therefore, a lot of my questions are going to be about how has your imagination evolved? How has it reflected through your creativity? So my first question is, I'm going to get you to reflect a little bit. You don't have to tell me the name of the person, but bring to your mind a friend who understands you, completely understands your strengths, your weaknesses, your past, your aspirations for the future. And then my question is, if you have that person in mind, how would that person describe you?
Somebody with infinite possibilities, but at this point of time, tired.
No worries. Okay. And what drives you, Mallika?
The possibility that the world doesn't have to be this rotten. The possibility that there is, in fact, a hope of reaching the light rather than the darkness within us, for there is light and darkness in all of us. And the world at the moment conspires to bring out the darkest in each of us. But I truly believe that we can and must get to a place where each of us brings out the light, and the light will bring out caring and generosity and a lack of insecurity and a possibility not of tolerance, but of genuine acceptance of each other, and a possibility of giving space to myself and to everybody else to be able to fulfill one's possibilities without trampling on anybody else.
That's beautiful. So an extension of that question is, if people just saw your art and your speeches and your lectures, they might see a vibrant, angry, reformist kind of a revolutionary. But when I have like watched so many of your videos, we spent 2-3 hours together talking. I saw your performance in Redwood City. I see an entirely different Mallika. I see almost like a yogini who reflects, who senses the environment, and she has something in her image, in her imagination that she's working towards, and her outbursts are more a way of breaking those walls that get in the way of coming to that imagination. Would that be a fair interpretation of what I see?
I don't know. What I do know is that injustice makes me feel awful, any kind of injustice. Just before I came on to talk to you, I was sent one of the vilest videos I have seen of what is happening to stray dogs as Delhi prepares for G20.
In preparation for the G20 summit being held in Delhi this September 2023, it has been brought to our notice through various videos on social media platforms that the Municipal Corporation of Delhi and its administration has launched a massive illegal drive to pick up our community dogs from several areas across the city in a most cruel and arbitrary manner. This negligence is not only a deliberate violation of the Honorable Supreme Court order, but also a violation of the Animal Welfare Board of India Guidelines 2023, which prohibits animal relocation.
It completely, I mean, and then I say to myself, but this is how people treat other people as well. Is it because I love dogs so much and because they are helpless? But then children are helpless and they are done this too. And so many groups who are marginalized are helpless. When Yogi Adityanath bulldozes the houses of the poor and then stands on the bulldozer and poses as the bulldozer Baba, it's the same behavior. It is, I have the power of you and I will show you at every moment how I crush you. And that's when the rage engulfs me. The rage is not against the perpetrators of this horrendous cruelty and egotism. The rage is against the good people who just stand by and pretend that it's not happening. The people who still discuss stocks and shares at dinner tables. I'm not saying that any of us can survive with only living with this vileness, but it has to be an open wound in you that you are trying to heal. Even when you are looking for beauty, that wound is there, and that wound cannot be wiped away. Why is it that when a middle class person's home is declared partially illegal, why is there so much panic? Why do they call everybody? Why do they pull out their black money and try and bribe people? You understand that fear. So why do you not understand the terror of the people who have nobody to call, whose cell phone has just been crushed in the bulldozer? That's when the rage comes out. The inner journey is one of trying to not want of the material world, of trying to divest of things, of wanting things, of collecting, of amassing, of not wasting anything. I mean, I am OCD about dripping traps, and I'm OCD about people throwing away food and all of that. But I have learned that unless there is a core inside me that is not panic-stricken, that does not go into hyperventilation mode whenever there is a crisis, and there are crises all the time. So it's a balancing act, because it's not by my inner attempt at, for want of a better word, samadhi, that I can raise people's consciousness, that I can jolt people. You saw my performance, Yadavans, and my performance at Redwood City. The idea of dedicating that particular piece to Manipur came as we were rehearsing it. The choreographer, Vikram Iyengar, had no idea that I was going to dedicate it. And when we did, he immediately said, Mallika, how very, very apt. And it seems to have touched a chord in a lot of the dancers. Now, that's 80 people there and their families who normally spend their time driving their children to tuition and back, and school and back, and tennis and back, and swimming and back, who then rush to their jobs and come back to cook for a father-in-law or mother-in-law and wait for their husband. This is their life. And for me to have the ability through the work to even make them think slightly differently, or make them aware that there is a world beyond the very small world that we have made, and that our very small world is fragile. Today, it's somebody else that you think is very far from you. Tomorrow, it could be you. If somebody like Trump comes in, or Mr. Ramaswamy, or whatever his name is, a lot of the immigrants there are going to get help. So your very cushy, comfortable job, whether legal or illegal, in the United States might not be there tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And that's not
that's not a thought that occurs to people, and it needs to occur to people because our entire world is crumbling.
Absolutely. And towards that, what I really have discovered as a connoisseur of arts and as a practitioner of design is that a lot of it is about where people pay attention. Do they pay attention to the rhetoric that is being dished out to them to benumb their own agency and to be carried away by this narrative? Or can they turn their attention to their inner voice? I do believe that nature has given us innate sensitivity for harmony, justice, and love. And it's just that we neglect, we pay our attention away from that and listen to all these things. And
That's the
art,
light. That's the light I was talking about earlier. That is the light that is in all of us, except it's completely eclipsed.
but I think you are doing that. You are just turning their attention in the darkness of the auditorium. When I watched people providing new interpretations of be it Draupadi or be it Sita, they were there for a religious celebration of Durga, and they were listening to your interpretations, and they were lapping it up. They were applauding you. And I'm seeing that reaction in the audience. You almost took them in a meditative state and to consider an alternate perspective. Do you always get that kind of a reaction?
I suppose I must be getting it more than the other kind because I'm still going after 43 years.
Yeah. And I think I do believe that people need to hear people like you, people like Dadi, who are bringing out just the simple, beautiful human nature that must prevail over this hatred and animal instinct that has been unleashed on people.
Don't call it an animal instinct because no animal does what we do. I think the worst abuse that you can give a human being is to call them human.
Yes.
Because no other race is cruel and goes into violence as a sport like we do.
Thank you. I appreciate your correction. I'm so glad I keep talking to you and you keep correcting me. So this is fantastic. So I want to go to another, having established your core and your concerns and where you're coming from, I want to go back in time. I remember I was watching one of your YouTube videos and you said Peter Brook's Draupadi was a transformatory moment in your life. Can you tell me a little bit about how was it a transformatory moment?
You know, however much I tried as I grew up not to live leaning on the Sarabhai name, the Sarabhai name was huge. In some senses, it still is, but it was huge. And so I always had a support system. And as I established myself as a dancer, anywhere that I went in the world, most people in the dance world or the arts world had heard of my mother. And there was this feeling, you know, what will the daughter turn out to be like? So that was one thing. When I went away to act at Peter Brook's Mahabharata, that entire support system got cut away. I had never done professional theater. Amma hadn't, so there was no name attached to that. I didn't speak any French. I was the only Indian. I was the only one who was a professional dancer and had never done professional theater. I was a new mother. Revanta was 5 weeks old. I had no idea how to live by myself. I had refused to go to college and university abroad. The farthest I went away from home was the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad. So everything that I had subliminally assumed would be there as a safety net disappeared. Peter Brook was very sure that he did not want to build on my reputation as a dancer, and I already had a reputation as a dancer in Europe. So I was the only one from amongst 22 actors who was not allowed to dance in the performance. Everybody else who didn't dance, couldn't dance, danced. He wanted to introduce me to the world of professional theater as a tragedian. I come from a background where every moment of work, however tedious, is ananda. Peter comes from Stanislavski, where if you are acting tragedy, you need to destroy yourself and become that tragedy. I would be doing a very serious scene with all my heart, and Revanta would need to be breastfed, and I would go off and I'd be giggling with him and having fun with him. And this Peter found unacceptable. After 14-hour rehearsals, everybody else wanted to sit at his feet and listen to the guru speak. For me, Peter was a wonderful director, but was not a guru. I just wanted to go home and take my hair down. Literally, there was a lot of hair. And play with my new baby and not have anything to do with the rehearsals. And the other thing was that I have been fascinated by Draupadi since I was a very young child. To me, she was the rebel that couldn't be rolled up into a acceptable to the patriarchal Indian mold. And I had read a lot of Draupadi as I grew up. I had read things like Iravati Karve, and I had read various interpretations and so on. One of the first things Peter said to me in a rehearsal is, Mallika, don't raise your voice, you sound like a shrew. And I said, Peter, India doesn't have shrews, we have Shaktis. And we have Shaktis who let loose. If you wanted polite women, you should have done the Ramayana and not the Mahabharata. And this was the kind of argument I used to have. Now, you must remember this was 1984. There were no Xerox machines. You had a facsimile. You had to sort of crank copies out. There was no courier service. There were no phones where you could pick up the phone. And so every time that I had arguments with Peter, I would wait for 3 days and the operator would say, pending, pending. You must remember that. And finally, after 3 days, you got through to home. And I would say to Amma, do you remember that book? Please send it to me. And my mother would go and look for it. And then she would send it by post. It would come 10 days later. Then I would refer to it. Then I would go and show it to Peter. And this was, in some senses, I had to, for the first time, prove, dispute, discourse, every single thing I believed in. And this took me on an inward journey of becoming completely self-reliant and being able to stand up for what I said or what I believed in or what I acted or what I danced. Peter was an amazing director. He used to drive you mad, and he showed me how to, like an onion, peel away both a character and simultaneously yourself till you come to the shunya, which is the truth or the relative truth at that time. And it was hell for the first year. I hated it. I wanted to run away. Every time I wanted to run away, Amma would fly to Paris and calm me down. Or my then husband, Bipin, would come and they would stay for a month and try and calm me down and say, you know, you can't possibly, you'll never forgive yourself. You've never given up on anything. And if you give up on this, you'll never forgive yourself. Till at one point, I think Peter and I came to an understanding. I used to always think that I was the weak link in the play because, you know, I was not a theatrical star or a movie star from anywhere. I was a dancing star, sure, but that was not what was at play. And at some stage, I think about 5 months into the previews, I started feeling that I was bringing something very crucial to the play that nobody else could. And it was perhaps my integrity as an Indian that was bringing it. Perhaps it was the kind of person I was. I don't know. But that changed the equation between Peter and me. And he started grudgingly admitting sarcastically that I was a linchpin of the play and that I was important in bringing all the diverse elements together. But that journey of 5 years was a journey into my soul. It was a journey to say, okay, you're a beautiful woman, you're a beautiful dancer, so everybody says. But what is it that you want to say? So everything that I have become as an artist after that, and my journey as an artist as I am today really started at the end of the Mahabharata, when I came out thinking, I have in my hands, through the performing arts, a rare language to reach beyond prejudice, to go through walls that people put up. And with this potent language, what is it that I want to tell the world? Women, of course, and dignity, human rights, nonviolence, respect for all things. These were the linchpin. And I felt that there was a huge intersection of all of these in the lives of women. You know, women got the bad end of the stick in every way. And whether it was violence or whether it was being marginalized, whether it was men turning your body into the honor ground so that they could rape you to get back at your clan or your family or whatever, I thought that if I dealt with various aspects of the issues of women, in trying to reach out to women to say there is an alternative for each of us. Nobody's going to give you that, but there is an alternative. And in doing so, if I could reach some good men who would also understand that they are as imprisoned in the structures and expectations of society differently than the women, but no less frighteningly. It's just that they don't see it. Women at least see it. That most of my early work was primarily aimed at women. I got out of the Mahabharata and I couldn't find anybody to write what I wanted. I couldn't find anybody to give voice. And I have never considered myself a creator before that. I considered myself as somebody who was the perfect mud with which to make sculpture, but never the sculptor. And I was forced into becoming a creator because nobody seemed to understand what I wanted to say or what I wanted to do. So in many ways, my real journey began then in 1990, the journey that has brought me here. I was diffident, I was shy. I remember in my first piece, Shakti, the Power of Women, I was reinterpreting Mirabai. I have learned classical Hindustani music since I was a child. I took it as a subject in SSC. I got a gold medal for it, but I never had the courage to sing in public. And I remember for hours sitting in front of a mirror and saying to myself, Mallika, nobody knows whether Meera sang in tune. Nobody knows if she had a voice that was acceptable. She is remembered for her song. You can't separate Meera from song. Mm-hmm. And your hesitation is your ego. It's nothing else. How does it matter if somebody says you sang out of key? Or how does it matter if somebody says you don't have the most beautiful voice? That's not the point. You are trying to get the rebel Meera to the audience. So what is more important, what you want to say or your own shyness, which comes from ego? And that is really the point at which I broke this idea that I had to look beautiful, that I had to be the perfect epitome of everything. And what I wanted to say overtook any inhibitions that I had in what people would think of me. Having said that, that does not mean that I have let myself go, become a round potato like so many artists do. I still try and feel good, look good, be good in what I do. I rehearse for hours, I exercise for hours, I eat correctly, I do all those things. But I do them so that my temple, which is my body and my mind and my thoughts, are at their peak so that I can communicate to the audience to which I want to communicate. If I want to go in a car race, the least I can do is see that my car is in perfect condition. If I go into that race, not even having serviced the engine, then I have really no place in being in that race. And I think that was the great transformation that happened. I was so lonely. I was so depressed, and I had to find inner sources, inner resources. Until then, I had been spoiled by a loving family, an adoring family, early success. And here I had to find the steel in myself. And it is that steel which stands me in good stead even today, because everything that is around me has transpired for 20 years to destroy me, destroy the institution, destroy the ideas that I fight for. And the fact that not only am I standing here, but that you think it important to talk to me justifies that finding that steel and holding on to it somewhere inside of me was the correct thing to do.
Beautiful. I have one question there. In that moment when you were having this inner dialogue, feeling lonely, but still discovering your inner steel, did you have anyone external with whom you could share your thoughts, feelings, and uh, find like a mirror or a sounding board?
Yes, I had a friend, and I had Amma. But in some senses, my journey was mine. Neither of them were as politically inclined as I was. And I was very aware that coming out of the Mahabharata, I would be saying and doing things that were considered the holy cow of India, the holy cow of Hinduism, the holy whatever of Islam, that I was going to be upsetting a lot of apple carts. And I think ultimately there are people who can empathize, but the journey is a solo one. Always.
So, one thing when I reflect over what you just said, like in the moment, I do know that, especially from my personal experience with my mother, that there are many women in Indian society who have gone through this kind of an awakened consciousness, and has your transformation brought you closer to finding such allies around you, or do you still feel it's a lonely battle?
No, I'm not saying it's a lonely battle. I have amazing women around me. I don't mean around me like this, but in my consciousness, amazing women and men that I strike a very deep chord with. And I don't feel alone, but I do feel that each of us has a journey that is solo. Not even somebody who is closest to me has the configuration of complexities. So it's the AUB phenomenon. You know, there's one part that correlates with somebody, there's another part that correlates with somebody else, there's a third part that correlates with somebody else. And it's very nurturing to know that there are parts. But when those parts come together, it's just me. Because there's another set of parts that comes together for somebody else, and the third set of parts that comes together for somebody else. So I I truly believe that in this life's journey, one is alone. One is very lucky if one has close people, but one is never 100% close to anybody.
That's
One
fair.
just isn't.
In your mission of, obviously your journey was personal, but your causes were universal, right? They were societal.
Yes.
They are societal. So how does the fact that there are so many people who are taking their individual journeys yet contributing to this larger cause, how does that play out in your mind?
You know, I was incredibly privileged in the families I was born in. As I was growing up, nobody talked about this, but I could see every single person on both sides of my family constantly being vigilant on how to build the nation, on how they could contribute into a more just society, a more educated society, a society which gave people dignity, a society which didn't have echelons of prejudice and of privilege everywhere. I mean, I don't think that I have seen a single person in either the women of the Sarabhai family or the women of the Swaminathan family ever discuss jewelry, ever, or ever go to a jeweler, ever. And that's true of me as well. But, but it's inconceivable for an Indian woman or even an Indian man to say that. I mean, I had this really funny thing the other day that I needed some earrings mended and I don't know a single jeweler. So I was phoning people and saying, do you have a jeweler that I can take a real earring to? My Bharatanatyam jewelry broke. And I said, you know, this is heirloom jewelry for me. It came from my mother. I don't want to give it to somebody else. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Here I am sitting in the midst of a million ads of diamonds here and gold here and platinum here. And I don't know a single jeweler.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just one silly aspect. I mean, it wasn't that there weren't people in the family. For my mother, aesthetics was very important. But she would find an old piece of embroidery and she would look at it. And so it was not about the new and the showy. It was about, I mean, what I'm wearing just now is an exquisite piece of embroidery, of mirrorwork embroidery, which to my delight, designers and craftspeople are now reviving. So it wasn't, I'm not talking of beauty value, I'm talking of money value.
Mm-hmm.
I always remember my Aunt Mridula, boss as she was called, because she was a boss, always going around in crumpled khadi kurta pajama. And Delhi used to be very hot and it was not a period when people had air conditioners. And she had an ice bag on her head. And she would sit in these meetings with this ice dripping down. And I would think as a child, my God, doesn't she feel funny with this? And then at some stage, I understood that it didn't matter. To her, the fact that she was trying to get Sheikh Abdullah to become the chief minister of Kashmir was the important thing. And if she could last through those meetings longer by having ice dripping down her head, so be it. You know, so my grandmother, the same. My Amma's sister, Captain Lakshmi Sehgal. I mean, I have seen her lying down on rail tracks. As a child, I have seen her doing that, stopping trains. She's a communist. She was a communist. Her daughter Subhashini, my cousin, is a communist. I myself am left wing. But I have seen these people never talk about, oh, we want to do this for our country. Oh, we are great nationalists. Oh, say Jai Shri Ram, say this, say the other. None of this. It was just that they went about their jobs and went about their passion, and that happened to be this country and this world. So, you know, this was the atmosphere one grew up in. Nobody was telling us what to do and what not to do. And most of my cousins don't seem to have picked this up. I obviously did, because that is what was crucial to me. That is what remains crucial to me.
Absolutely. So that takes me to another, actually, I'm going to seek your interpretation of something. So I want to express something and seek what you see in what I'm going to say. So this project which I started, The Legacy of India's Imagination, I started believing I'm going to do 5 interviews.
5.
Yes. And right now I'm on the 18th. And I have 35 more lined up. And anybody who goes through the interview tells me, oh my God, this feels so different. They go and watch other interviews and they start coming back to me and saying, oh, you must talk to this person.
As I did when I met you.
Yes, you've given me so many references. So what is going on? On one hand, like literally before I started this project, I was in a mode of almost depression of what's happening to India. And I'm listening to these voices coming out of the woodworks and saying, I want to tell my story. I want to share my story. So what is going on? Like, why is this happening?
I think there's a certain urgency, an urgency that you feel, an urgency that a lot of us feel in seeing that the essence that brought India's independence and the first many years of idealism isn't lost in this world of neoliberal capitalism and consumerism. And memories are short, and we can pretend that none of this existed, that it was always a cruel and vile India, an India where you can step over anybody, kill nature, and the only thing important is the power of the bulldozer.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of us feel this need to talk of the idealism that drives us, to talk of the beauty that we see in so much that is Indian still, and to try and ignite others into examining it, if not appreciating it, to know that a different India existed. For instance, in Ahmedabad, there are 30 and 35-year-olds who have never seen a syncretic city, who cannot imagine that the Muslims didn't live in ghettos. That's 35 years or 30 years of BJP rule. And I look at them and I think, you know, if this is what you truly believe and you don't care beyond that, then you are missing out on so much in life by reducing yourself to a single identity, a single color, a single shade, a single taste. And life is so much richer. And India is just a palette that reflects that life, that reflects a life of giving and caring and sharing and rejoicing together, and not constantly thinking about whether my Mercedes is being noticed or not, or not wondering if that fragrance of the flower that suddenly I got a whiff of comes from my garden or from my neighbor's garden. I think that might be one of the reasons that you are getting such an enthusiastic response from the speakers.
Yeah, it's almost like everybody is working off each other's stories and creating this almost like a tsunami that's going to wash out all this junk that is accumulating in people's minds.
Inshallah.
Wonderful. So that takes me to the next question. Your training was in Bharatanatyam and Kuchipudi. Indian classical dance have their roots in religion and scriptures and old stories, though you have reinterpreted many of those stories to bring the injustice to women in even those stories, or the power of women that is not as visible in those stories to the surface. But knowing that Indian ethos and Indian psyche is so rooted in religion, how do you see, how do you
religion?
to the fact
Whose
that
religion? Whose representation of religion? What I'm trying to do is to say that for a culture where Ardhanarishwara was the beginning of the universe, which genetically DNA says is correct. We all have X chromosomes and Y chromosomes. So somebody dreamt this concept up thousands of years ago. Our gods are called by their wives' names. So it's Radha Krishna, it's never Krishna Radha. It's Uma Shankar, it's never Shankar Parvati. It's Lakshmi Kant, Lakshmi's husband, Vishnu. Where did we slip up? And if we did slip up, what are all the things that we lost in that slipping up? And I have made it something of a mission, not to say, I mean, you saw my interpretation of Savitri. Savitri is worthy of being emulated and worshipped, but not for the reasons that are given to us.
In fact, she never went sati, right? That's like...
She never said, I will die if my husband dies.
Yeah, and she's only known as Sati Savitri. Where did that misinterpretation happen?
But I keep telling people this, that if being a sati was such a great idea, men would have taken it away from women a long time ago. They would have all become satis.
Yeah. Wonderful. So do you have any trace of being religious?
Yes and no. When I first began dancing professionally, Amma gave me a very beautiful brass Devi Murti, and my Kuchipudi guru gave me a matching in size silver Nataraja. They are mine. I talk to them. I ask them to allow me or to guide me to seeing the light that is in me. But then I also talk to my body. I thank my body every day for giving me the ability to do what I can and what I do. I find some mantras very soothing, sound-wise, but I won't let anybody interpret it for me. I don't brook any middlemen in the form of priests or gurus or shastrijis or any of that. It's a very personal, I don't know, where does the word religion end and spirituality start? I certainly believe that there is a larger energy than that we can see, and science is proving that every day. I'm a pranic healer. I've had astral experiences. These are all real. I have been in the Philippines where I have seen people use their personal energy to split skin, to split matter. I have also seen laser beams do the same. So if we can believe in laser beams, why don't we believe in the other? Because after all, we are only millions of atoms resonating at all times. So is my belief in that religion or spirituality, or just a belief in a larger nature, a larger energy? But then I also turn to Devi and I've written a varnam on this, saying, Devi, I know that you are just a small brass sculpture, that whatever I see in you is what I imbibe in you, what I have given you. So why is it that I need you? Because I know you're just that, a piece of brass. And I end by saying that I need to believe in you, because with all the atrocities and cruelty I see around me at all times, I need to believe that there is a better world. And I vest that belief in you, so that even when I am breaking apart with what I see, I can still hold on to you and remind myself of my belief in a different world. So is that religion or is that spirituality?
No, this is beautiful, because in this moment, I have an interpretation of what you said.
Okay.
For you, and I've never thought of it this way, so it just came to me in our conversation. Your Devi is an embodiment of your own conscience.
Yes.
And when you
Yes.
stop listening to your conscience, you're
She
there.
brings me back.
She reminds you that you have that conscience in you. And why
Yeah.
don't you start listening to it? So when you actually think you are talking to that inanimate object, you're actually talking to your conscience.
Yeah. I
Would
think
that
you're
be
right.
a fair interpretation?
Yes. Yes.
Because
Yes.
that interpretation appeals to my own secular beliefs, where I don't feel tied to one religion or one god, and I don't anymore feel the need to deny or accept the existence of a god. So, which is beautiful. Thank you for doing that for me. So from what you are saying is that, like, from this interpretation, it is important for people to have an icon that reflects their conscience. But what the current ideologues, Hindutvavadis, are doing is actually they're focusing you on something that is a mirage and moving you away from your own conscience.
You know,
More and more
Hindutva,
people are listening to WhatsApp more than to their conscience.
but Hindutva is the Islamization of Hinduism. By all the Abrahamic religions have rules, have the idea of sin. Our philosophy did not have the idea of sin. It had the idea of dharma at that moment. So even if my dharma as a mother is to be non-violent, if my child is being raped, I am following my dharma in saving my child, even if it means harming the rapist. It is like the world, not stuck in stone. Nothing in nature is fixed. And everything in nature is like this. And your perspective also changes. Now, this is a very difficult concept to follow because not everybody wants to ask their conscience, is this the right thing for me to do? People would rather have a set of 10 rules and then say, okay, if I take a bath in the filthy Ganga every day, then I can screw everybody all day. Or I can be a murderer, or I can break down my neighbor's house. And that's fine as long as I do this or pull my ears or whatever it is that your religion says. And I think that is where my problem with any religion is that somebody at some point in life, which may not have any reality with what is the world we live in today, has made a rule and has said that by following that rule, you will go to the Huris, or you will reach whoever, God or goddess, or go to the heavens, or whatever that is. And it completely takes away an individual's responsibility for humane behavior. And
I
that's
love
what
that.
concerns me.
In fact, I'm not, while listening to you, I'm actually, what I'm realizing is that through all these dialogues I've had over the last 2.5 months, nobody talks about Marx. Nobody talks about big ideologues or ideologies. A lot of people who had these dialogues talked about Gandhi, Buddha, Ambedkar, and talked about humanity in us. Even if they consider themselves as Marxist or leftist or communist or whatever, how is it that these names keep coming up? They've lasted beyond any ideologies lasting. There's something in that.
Yeah, I think the next generation won't remember those names. The next generation will remember Godse and Savarkar and Hitler. And of course, Mr. Modi.
Do you think so? Do you really believe so?
I'm afraid so.
Because I am sensing, I also travel a lot, not as much as you do. I'm also sensing that people are fighting their conscience in believing in WhatsApp. And I think conscience is more powerful than WhatsApp.
आपके मुंह में गुड़ शक्कर ऐसे से.
And thank you. And I do believe that a fatigue for what is being told and what is being denied to them is creeping in. That's my observation. And I hope you will begin to see that also.
No, no, listen, I live in eternal hope. I live in eternal hope for a miracle. I live in eternal hope for a revolution of the conscience of people. Otherwise, I wouldn't continue doing the work I do. Otherwise, I would have given up and gone and sat on a mountaintop and looked at the snow. But I am also a pragmatist, and I have seen a lot of genuine hope dashed to the grounds. I see the value of the purchasing power. When you're talking of purchasing silence by 100 crores, it's difficult to say no for most people. When you are purchasing silence by saying, we will cut up your grandmother, your mother, and your daughter, it's difficult to talk of conscience. I'm aware of those realities. I live with them around me in this country at every moment. So, you know, I'm a fanatical, I want things to be clean person. So on the campus in Darpana, I'm often termed the Kachra Valley. I should be named the Safai Valley because my eye picks up any bit of garbage, any bit of silver paper and so on, and I pick it up. And the minute I pick it up, 20 people come to pick it up. And I'm saying, didn't you see it? And then I say to myself, I go somewhere and it's absolutely filthy. And I say to myself, how is it that they can live in this filth? And then I catch myself and I say to myself, perhaps it's a luxury today in India to even think in those terms. If I don't even know where I'm going to feed my children from, then cleanliness perhaps, or neatness or hygiene, which might keep my family healthy, may be very low on my priority. If I'm in a basti where I'm terrified as a girl to just go out to pee because I might be raped, then things like cleanliness fall very low. So yeah, I have these conversations with myself all the time.
So since this archive, the legacy of India's imagination, I want it to survive for 100 years. For the generation that will see it when you will not be around, how would you express your core, your beliefs, and your imagination to them?
That each of us has the power to change things around us. And each of us has the right and the obligation to use that power to the fullest to bring about a better world.